in Jewish society is usually persona non grata with those who have been the beneficiaries of the system.
It is June, that time of the year, you all, when beats and melodies unite African American Music Appreciation Month. But for me, it's every day of the year, right? I feel like Black music has been the soundtrack to our lives, the soundtrack really to America. When you look at the movement, when you look at the culture, when you look at the trends that Black music has set, when you also look at those who have been singing these songs and creating these melodies, have also played a vital role in our civil rights movement, in our movement forward. So of course, the first person who I wanted to talk to about African American history, Music History Month, is my brother, Reverend Al Sharpton, who is, like, I would say, one of the civil rights leaders who's like a musical Bible, I will say, especially being raised under the tutelage of the late, great James Brown. What say you, sir, about this month?
I think it's a great opportunity to focus on Black music history. And as you so accurately stated, how it mirrors where we were in our struggles in America at the same time. Gospel music and music that we would sing in the latter days of slavery, in many ways became coded ways of sending messages about slave rebellions and about trying to get to the Underground Railroad. Is intertwined with our history. And the spirituals that came out of gospel and on into jazz and to blues. What was the blues? But people that had been slaves or that were segregated, all the way into rhythm and blues and soul music and on and on. And if you, one of the things that are so impressive to me about our music is the continuity of our music, because gospel was always the basis of R&B, and jazz was also there, and church music was also there. Mm-hmm. And into R&B, you get the emergence of people like James Brown that the rappers use and sample this stuff. So it's all one thread of expressing different music and different expressions at different times in our history. I will never forget, and I'll share this with you, Ebony. One night I was with James Brown, and as you stated, we were very close. He became like a father figure to me. And he liked to, when he was not on the road, he would like to just sit down and talk. And I'd go for long rides with him. I think that's how I got to be like a son to him, because most people around him, when they come off the road, they want to go home. They didn't want to be bothered. And I would come down and just spend time with him. And we rode one night. He pulled up. I think we were in his Excalibur or Rolls Royce. He had about 30 cars. And we pulled up in this parking lot of the House of Prayer in Augusta, Georgia, Daddy Grace's church. And we sat there. And I'm looking like, why are we here? And I didn't say nothing. I'm looking. Just me and him in the car. He loved to drive. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, he said, "You hear that?" I said, "Hear what?" He said, "You hear that?" And he pointed at the church. I said, "Yeah, I hear a choir in there singing." He said, "You hear the band?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "When I was a little boy in Augusta, I didn't have clothes to wear to go to church. I used to stand in this lot listening to the band and the choir. Daddy Grace was the first church to let a band in it." He said, "And I learned my beat from them, because if you listen, they don't go 2/4 beat, they go 1/3 beat, the half beat, which I brought into soul music." He said, "I didn't get that, Reverend, from the out in the music world. I got that from Daddy Grace's church. And when you hear me say, take it to the one, that's where I got it from. The one, which is the 1, 3B I got from Daddy Grace's church. It's all intertwined.
Never knew that. And I go eat at the United House of Prayer here. So everybody, I mean, the band with Daddy Grace's church is legendary. They come
Absolutely.
out of
Absolutely.
legendary. My God.
And one of the strengths of Daddy Grace's church is they're open every day and feed people. He would feed people. And I tell people now, you know, I'm vegetarian, I don't eat chicken anymore. But the best chicken in Harlem is Daddy Grace's church. House
in
of Prayer,
DC too?
125th. 8th.
In DC too, there is a lot. I'm telling you, that's the best food you'll ever eat. But it's interesting that you mentioned from sacred music to folk music to blues to country, R&B, rap, hip hop, all of it. I'm thinking about country right now because even in the midst of talking about music, right, we have one of our greatest artists, also Beyoncé, facing backlash for putting out a country album, and it has become so politicized. Our music is always people try to politicize it because they're trying to say. I've seen tweets and even major journalists say, so now the left is trying to take over country?
Yeah. No, the fact that, I mean, first of all, if you look back to Charlie Pride and all them, Ray Charles did a country music. It is absurd how they politicize even blacks doing what we always did.
Right.
Nobody was big in country music than Charlie Pride. I remember James, Mr. Brown went to the Grand Ole Opera. And I'm not talking as one that just was a fan. I got to know these people. I said on Politics Nation just last night, kicking off Black Music Month, I did the eulogy at James Brown's funeral, Michael Jackson's funeral, Etta James's funeral. I spoke at Aretha Franklin's funeral, and Isaac Hayes' funeral. So I'm talking about giants that I knew. Every one of them I named, I knew them. And I would hear their story because I've always been like a sponge. I wanted to know what made them them. So I'm telling you what I know. Nobody knew country better than Isaac Hayes.
Right, who has been sampled more than anybody else.
Yes, he was there in Memphis where a lot of it was. So I think that for them to try and weaponize it against Beyonce shows their ignorance, not showing that she's out of bounds.
I'm glad you talk about that. And I want to stay on the weaponization of it because when I was thinking about you, I was thinking about, do I want to talk about, are we going too far from the sexy reds or from this? And we have to deal with all types of our music, right? And our expression. But the first thing I thought about is just recently we saw former President Donald Trump in the Bronx having a speech and bringing up two rappers on the stage. And I said, I didn't know who they were. And I said, wow. Look how they are taking our music and then trying to use it as a bait to bring us in and take us back, really, to take us back to where our music has brought us forward, whether that's on voting rights, whether that's on reclaiming our bodies. So you dangle our music in front of our face from, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't know who they were.
I'd never heard of them. I asked the young people on my staff at Nash Action Network. They never heard of them. I asked on my radio show, if anybody out there called me. Nobody called. And I understand they've got serious criminal charges. So it is the absolute contempt that Donald Trump has demonstrated. He can just throw anybody at us, tell us they rappers of some reputation, and we're supposed to go for that. And I think that there has always been elements that would do things that were negative in terms of music, but they were never considered the mainstream of black music. I'm not talking about in mainstream. They were never the ones that we looked up to. And we always had people that were risque, but we knew the difference between Aretha Franklin and Millie Jackson. And I think that, you know, Millie was great in her place. I know Millie well. But Millie did not try to act like she would endorse candidates and all that. She was a risque artist. And they're trying to act like those on the side, those that are risque, those that are shock value, are representative of our community. And that's insulting. To have some rappers that nobody ever heard of with a criminal record from here back to wherever, and act like we supposed to be influenced by them shows you what he thinks of our community.
And fall for the okie doke. I'm looking for the those coming in this genre like a Marvin Gaye asking what's going on, because that was the
Right.
first song that came to my mind. You know, even speaking about wars on this topic, just in the few minutes that we have left, what steps when we talk about the heightened political climate that we are in now, do you feel that Black music can play a role in shaping our way forward, and how so? I think about the Drake and Kendrick battle that we're seeing going on, and I went online and saw some Pan Africanists say, "Okay, great, you got the world's attention. Can you talk about what's going on in Haiti? Can you talk about what's going on in the Congo?"
And I think that was the difference between a lot of those stars, superstars that became historic figures. James Brown and Motown used to have fights. Who was the real rhythm and blues? But they both put out music that was above their battles. This ain't the first generation they didn't get along, but they had standards that they believed in. There were fights in Stax Records and Dick Griffey's firm, but they both addressed the issues. They loved their fans enough to stand up. This, I think, that what we've run into is this the first generation where Blacks don't really own a lot of these stations and streaming that these artists come from. So there's no consciousness, and they if there is some, their owners will not want to put it out. Because you got to remember, 50 years ago, we owned Motown. We owned Stax Records eventually. We owned other, Dick Griffey owned Solar Records. How did we get 40, 50 years down the road and all our major artists are owned? I asked an artist, I won't call his name, very well-known artist, I said, let me ask you a question. Y'all buy all these cars and Lamborghinis and diamonds and all that. I remember in the late 60s, Stevie Wonder and James Brown bought radio stations. James Brown told me, that's how we make our money is airplay. Why aren't we invested in our airplay? Why don't y'all own some of the vehicles that you promote your business? I ain't even talking about for the community. You in live stream, you in records. Why aren't you owning radio stations and live stream? Why are you buying toys that you know you're not going to be able to use them as an asset, and sooner or later they're gonna come take it from you? It doesn't make sense, other than this is a generation that are letting others advise their finances, and therefore we don't have the economic empowerment we had in the music industry. And that ought to be something we talk about during Black Music Month.
You know what is funny, Reverend Sharpton? I'm glad that we're kind of ending on that, because I wanted to end with the legacy. How do we take steps to ensure the legacy of Black music? Because whether it is from journalism, Black-owned and operated stations like AURN, or whether it is whatever business aspect, whether it's in finance, whether it's in music, at the end of the day, it is about ownership.
It's about ownership. And I tell people all the time, that's why AURN is very important. That's why what Kathy Hughes has done is very important.
Yes.
I tell people all the time, if you study any revolution, the first thing they do is take the radio and TV stations. You won't even know you had to change your government if somebody didn't announce it. The moment we gave up ownership, we gave up a lot of our culture, and we gave up a lot of our politics.
Oof. And we're fighting still, even for the ownership of our bodies. That's why it's important. All this boils down to make sure you all, anyone who's watching, get out and vote. Even this conversation is connected to that. Reverend, before we go, what do we need to be paying attention to right now?
We need to be paying attention to now making sure that they do not change the voting laws in your state, because they now went from the national to now state by state changing regulations. You can't use drop boxes. You can't do this or that. So we can be prepared. Don't get this temporary bump that Trump was convicted and you don't do the follow-up. I started a slogan this weekend that I got from one of my callers on radio station, D from Atlanta, saying, don't gloat, vote. All of this gloating, oh, they got him. I didn't think he'd get it. They got him. No, the only way to keep him out the White House is to vote. They did, the jury voted, and he may go to the big house. We got to vote and make sure he don't go to the White House.
I love it. I love it. On that note, Reverend, thank you. Today I felt truly like a student. I really did. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking with you again, sir.
All right. Thank you. Always good to talk to you, Ebony.
Absolutely.